Welcome to Live Vita, the show for women who are ready to break free from diet culture, nourish their bodies intuitively, and reconnect with their natural rhythms. I'm Shay, a registered holistic nutritionist and founder of the Vita Method, where I help women support their gut, hormones, and metabolism through practical, evidence-informed nutrition and lifestyle changes, all without the overwhelm. So whether you're struggling with bloating, energy crashes, metabolic imbalances, or just feeling confused and out of sync with your body, you're in the right place. Here we'll talk about real nourishment, metabolism, slow living, and everything in between. I'm so glad you're here. Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome to the first episode of the Live Vita podcast. On today's episode, I am talking all about me, and I thought that would be a really good place to start this. So I will introduce myself. I am Shaylin. I am your host, and I'm also a registered holistic nutritionist and wellness coach. I'm the founder of the Vita Method, a high-touch one-on-one coaching program that helps women overcome their tummy troubles, beat back IBS, resolve GERD and heartburn, and really get in sync with their bodies to start living a vital lifestyle. I love working with clients because I love to hear your story and I love building that relationship and really supporting you through your health challenges, and just being able to see people grow and become more confident in themselves is just such a wonderful thing to help facilitate. So I made this podcast this episode is to share my story ultimately, but the podcast itself, I want to talk authentically about gut health, metabolism, hormones, everything to do with holistic living, and really keeping it real, practical, and down to earth. I know there's a lot of information out in the holistic and nutrition world in those spaces, and I want to provide context for you because sometimes this information isn't actually for you. And I've learned this personally through my own journey by making mistakes and following advice that didn't actually really make sense for my body. But at the time, I didn't know better. And then I've ended up having to recover from situations that maybe I could have avoided if I had known a little bit more at the time. And especially it's hard because sometimes you feel like you're doing everything right, you're eating really healthy, you're getting all your veggies, you're drinking lots of water, but still things aren't better. And maybe they're actually getting worse. And there's nothing more frustrating than being like, going to the doctor or talking to somebody or reading some, advice online, whatever it may be. And all of that just tells you, hey, keep doing what you're doing. You're doing great. You're eating such a healthy lifestyle. You're living so healthy. Like, it'll get better, but it just keeps getting worse. And you're like, something is wrong. I know that because I've been there. I've spent years in that place, slowly pulling myself out of it. So I would love to be able to provide to you different information and context for common issues that we might be facing in today's society, specifically around gut health, metabolism, and hormones. So like I said, in today's episode, I'm going to talk mostly about my own big health struggles. I'm kind of keeping the topic specific to my struggles with gut health, really bad PMS, GERD, gastroesophageal reflux disease. I'm going to call that chronic heartburn from now on. So when I was 10 or 11, I remember this one memory. I was walking home from school and I started thinking like, maybe I'm going to turn into this crazy, like superhuman who can spit acid at people or like, I don't know, something like that. And so I was having really bad acid reflux, but I didn't know what it was as a kid. And I ended up going to the doctor and I had to drink some gross drink and they did some scans. I'm not exactly sure. I don't really remember. But basically I ended up being told that I have GERD or gastroesophageal reflux disease, which, like I said, I'm going to call chronic heartburn from now on. So I was medicated with Zantac, and that medication is now recalled, which kind of sucks because I took it for a really long time. But basically that medication worked as an H2 antagonist, which means it blocks the H2 receptors in the stomach. So they stop responding to histamine and then they don't produce stomach acid. Which ultimately is going to lead to immune issues because your stomach acid is one of the first defenses that you have in your immune system. It's the first thing that comes into contact with the outside world. And if you don't have enough stomach acid, then that means all sorts of things are getting into your intestines that aren't supposed to be there. So So that's when the dysfunction in my body really started, but obviously there was things wrong before that, otherwise I wouldn't have had heartburn at such a young age. I grew up in the late 90s and early 2000s. There was a lot around body culture, a lot of shame and depression around my body because it didn't look the way it was supposed to according to the standards at that time. I won't touch on that too much here because, again, I think talking about body image and body dysmorphia, both things that I've struggled with, deserves its own episode. But I kind of grew up with the whole like, finish your plate, you got to eat everything on your plate, there's starving children in Africa. Literally, I heard that at dinner time. I had a lot of food aversions when I was growing up, so I ended up eating a lot of cereal, and a lot of processed like packaged foods. Now sometimes I see those foods in the grocery store and I look at them and I read their ingredients and I'm like, I don't understand. Like, I can't believe that I ate this. But it makes perfect sense as to why I had heartburn and why I had all of these kind of inflammatory issues at such a young age. I also had really bad eczema at a young age. My skin was always red. There was so much. But anyway, so that was the beginning of the gut problems. By 11 years old, I started getting PMS. I had an early period. Because I had a lot of extra weight on my body, and your body actually, physiologically, you need body fat on your body to get your period when you're a young woman. So young women who don't have a lot of body fat, they're tall and lean, like kind of string bean little girls, they will get their periods later typically, and same with very athletic little girls, they're going to get their periods later because they just don't have enough body fat, and some of that activity is actually going to suppress the hormonal function, which may or may not be a good thing, depending on what's going on. But I had extra body fat on my body, so I got my period nice and early. I was still in elementary school. I think I was in grade 6, maybe grade 5. I was around 11 years old, but I got really, really bad PMS. Like, I couldn't even walk up a flight of stairs. I was in so much pain. It was absolutely awful. So all of this is going on with my body, such a young age, and then I'm feeling really depressed about my body and like really having a lot of issues too with like the male gaze. It's like suddenly all the little boys wanted to touch me, and then by like 12 or 13, older men wanted to talk to me. You know, that's a whole episode as well. Kind of weird culture that we live in. But so I was steadily gaining weight. I had lots of inflammation through my teens, and I started drinking when I was 14. And by drinking, I mean like pretty frequently. I was drinking alcohol, I was smoking weed, I was down like this dark path. Again, like growing up in the late 90s, early 2000s, it was really kind of, I feel like there was sort of this culture of like the Kurt Cobain culture, right? Kind of like not really caring about yourself and sort of rejecting standard culture, and that kind of got ingrained in me because I had a lot going on in my life that just felt out of control. And so what I could control was sort of how I felt, and how I felt was like, I want to drink and smoke weed because I don't want to go to high school and all of this. So those dark times for me started early, and they lasted for a really long time. Well, a long time for a teenager. So when I was 18 or 19, I sort of started to recover from this really self-destructive path. And then I became more like a normal young adult, and I was sort of like doing normal young adult drinking, normal young adult socializing. Like, it wasn't so extreme as it was in my early teens. But by this point, I had gained a lot of weight. I remember going to the doctor and she weighed me and she's like, I think I was like 235 pounds or something. And I was just like, what? And I got her to reweigh me because I didn't believe her. And then I was like, oh, okay, like this is a problem like that. You know, I've always had body dysmorphia, so weight fluctuations for me are really hard to recognize. But that was like a big eye opener where I was like, oh, that doesn't feel right for me. So like I said, I was kind of like recovered from my extreme rock and roll lifestyle at this point, and I was living more like a normal young adulthood. But I was really overweight. I still had gut issues. I was super inflamed. Like my skin was just red all the time. I still had really bad PMS. I had terrible mental health. Like all of these things were compounding on each other. But I ended up working in this grocery store that was catering mostly to Asian communities. So there was a lot of strange vegetables and things that I'd never seen before. And I would always ask the customers like, hey, what do you do with this? How do you cook this? So I slowly started learning how to cook from working at this grocery store and asking people who were shopping like what they do. And through that, I started making lots of stir fries and sort of eating more vegetables and getting off of this processed food diet that I had previously been on for so long because, like I said, I had a lot of food aversions, and I definitely was just eating for comfort for most of my teen years, which is why I ended up gaining so much weight. So in conjunction with eating all these stir fries and these more veggie forward dishes, I started moving my body more, and I had good support from like a few friends, and I would be riding my bike and walking around, and I ended up losing about 70 pounds. So I went into my early 20s feeling a lot healthier and recovered from this kind of dark path that I had been on for a long time. And one of the girls that I worked with at this grocery store was like, hey, you'd love working in restaurants. You should do the restaurant management program. And I was like, okay, whatever. Like I had tried a few things prior to this, but nothing really stuck. And at this point, I just wanted to make money. So I was like, yeah, restaurant management seems good. I went into that. I did this program, and then I was working in restaurants, managing restaurants, doing bartending and kind of in fine dining environments. And I was only in my early 20s. Like I was still really young and inexperienced in a lot of ways. So I don't know if you've ever worked in a restaurant before, but they can be really intense places to work that are very, very demanding from both management and from the customers or the guests. And I started burning the candle at both ends. So I was doing my job, going to school. I was still going out to some extent and like drinking with people just the way normal people do in their early 20s. And I had become pescatarian because I thought that was really healthy to eat just fish and veggies. But my lifestyle was starting to turn into something that was slowly leading to burnout. I was doing things like every morning starting my day with a quad shot in the dark. And if you don't know what that is, it's basically a cup of coffee that has 4 shots of espresso in it. So I'd be doing things like that. I'd be working out, going out, and just burning at both ends. I felt like the ways I was being healthy was somehow balancing out the ways I was being unhealthy, because I would do, like, I'd stay out all night with friends, and like we'd still be up when the sun came up, you know? And that started feeling really bad to me. I remember just like seeing a woman out jogging, and I've been up all night, and I'm like, this is not it. Like, this is not how I want to live. So I started gaining weight again through this. And I was also, like I said, kind of burning out from working in this restaurant industry where it's like I would literally have 7 hours between my shifts. So I would close the restaurant, go home, sleep for like 5-6 hours and go back to the restaurant, which is actually illegal where I live. But, you know, I was a kid and I was trying to make it in the world. So I ended up leaving the restaurant industry to take a really chill job in this holistic handmade skincare place. There's some really lovely women that helped me heal emotionally in that place. And I just want to point out here, like, I can be very introverted. I like to be on my own. I enjoy solitude. And I've always heard this, but it never really stuck until I looked back on my life. But we really do heal in community. Even if you're an introvert, even if you're like the lone wolf type, you need people. Like, we are human beings. We're just hardwired to need community. And that can look like just one person. It can be you and one other person. It can be you and a couple people over the course of many years. Most of the people have made a big impact on me. They weren't around my entire life. They've just been around for portions of my life, but they made a big difference. So it was at this little holistic handmade skincare store with all these lovely women where I started learning about holistic lifestyles in depth. Previously, I had worked at vitamin stores and organic kind of food stores, so I knew enough things and I was interested, but I didn't know the depth to which one could learn. And I started working with women who were holistic nutritionists, they were acupuncturists, they were doctors of Chinese medicine, and a whole world opened up to me. And I was like, wow, this is so cool. So through that environment, I had slowly become vegetarian, and then I eventually went vegan. And I was like a strict vegan vegetarian for 6 years. I was vegan for probably 2 years. And then the vegetarianism was very strict. Like, I was salt-free. I wouldn't have Worcestershire sauce, like all sorts of things. I wouldn't have gelatin. There's lots of things that I was very, very strict about. And I did do the vegan diet right. I ate my beans with my rice, and I ate lots of veggies, and I ate a lot of tempeh, and I made homemade seitan, which, if you don't know what that is, it's basically hydrated wheat gluten with spices. Anyway, through the vegetarian vegan kind of phase of my life, I lost about 40 to 50 pounds. And I got into really good shape. I was powerlifting, I was doing tons of yoga, I was long distance cycling, like I'd go for like 80-kilometer bike rides for fun. I was a very active person. And at this point, like I wasn't drinking, I wasn't going out. I was living a very like quiet, holistic kind of lifestyle. And I'd occasionally go out, for a special event or something like that, but overall, everything was very quiet for me. But what started happening during this time is I still had really bad PMS. I had a terrible relationship with my body despite how active and fit I had become. Because like I said, I have body dysmorphia. It's really hard for me to identify my body accurately. So my relationship with myself was still really struggling. And then new symptoms were coming up. So I was having a lot of dizziness, a little bit of dissociation randomly, really low blood pressure. And I started getting symptoms of mast cell activation syndrome, which included hives, minor swelling, especially around my period, belly pain. The IBS symptoms came raging in, and I had migraines and brain fog, heart palpitations, really low blood pressure and low pulse. Like I often felt like I was going to just collapse. And I didn't know what was wrong because, like I said, it's like I'm on this vegan, healthy diet. I'm exercising a ton. Like, what could possibly be wrong, right? And during this time, towards the end of my time working at this little holistic store, I was there for 3 years. A big life event left me really gutted. And what ended up happening is I just crashed completely into total burnout. I just went from struggling to incapacitated, and my body was just like, nope, like we're not doing anything anymore. So I had really bad dizziness, and I was very dissociative. I had really high anxiety. I was completely exhausted all the time. Like I describe it kind of as like everything was just flat and gray. Like it's like I wasn't depressed, but you could call it depression. But it's just like a lack of interest, everything flat, gray. There was no energy, there was no spark. It was a very severe kind of burnout that I see now in retrospect was just my entire life catching up with me. And this happened at the end of my 20s and right before the pandemic. So I was no longer working at the little hippie holistic skincare store. I was working somewhere else. And I ended up getting laid off because the company went under foreclosure, essentially. So getting laid off was a little blessing in disguise because my anxiety was really high. I had used cannabis all throughout this entire history, but suddenly I couldn't use it anymore. I was starting to have panic attacks. I was like too aware of my body when I had weed in me, so I just stopped. And I was like, I need to heal. Something is so wrong. I'm so burnt out. I need to heal. So I took the time to remove all substances from my life. Like I had no caffeine, no coffee, no tea, no cannabis, no alcohol. I didn't even take any like supplements at the time because I was so sensitive to everything that I put in my body that even small doses of things, like I just reacted so extremely to them. So I was just like, I just need to like let my body chill. And luckily, like I was laid off, so I was getting employment insurance payments and I just had time to take care of myself. And then the pandemic hit. So then I couldn't get a job anyway. So we were just kind of in this weird state during there, which I'm sure you all had your own experiences with. But during that time, I started learning about other diets. So I was still vegan, like strict vegetarian, and I was going through these issues. But I was at a Christmas and my sister was talking about how she was going to go carnivore. And I was like, what? Like, I had never heard of carnivore before. I was really grossed out and disgusted by the idea of carnivore. But I ultimately left that Christmas gathering and was like, what is this and why would people do this? And through looking into that information, I found a lot of stories about people who were vegan and they had very similar experiences and symptoms to me, like really extreme bloating and pain and dizziness and lightheadedness and all these issues. And they stopped being vegan and they got better. And so I started really considering it. And one thing I'll add is I mentioned earlier, like I didn't add salt to my diet when I was vegan because I was kind of put into that mental state of like, well, there's sodium in everything. Like there's so much sodium in everything. You don't need extra salt. You do need salt. Eat salt. It's not bad for you. And I did incorporate salt into my diet before I stopped being vegan, and it did help me quite a bit. It wasn't the major fix, but it did help. So yeah, we love salt over here. Anyway, my issues of like the extreme pain in my gut that would just like send me into my bed to writhe in pain after eating, the dizziness, the PMS, the unpredictable bowels, all of it. I was like, if eating meat is gonna make me better and make it so I don't have to rely on supplements for the rest of my life and I don't have to rely on protein powders and whatnot to make sure I'm like covering all my bases, then you know what, I'm gonna try it. And I researched it for 6 months. I read about it for 6 months. I was really like thinking about it, and finally I went to do it. My partner actually brought home some sushi grade tuna, and he made me kind of like a raw tuna ceviche style salad. And that was the first thing that I ate to break my veganism. Well, I was more a strict vegetarian at this time. But anyway, that was the first thing I ate. And I just remember like my brain lit up like there was fireworks in my brain. Like my body was just so starved for these nutrients and this nutrition that literally eating it, it was like fireworks going off. And I was just like, oh my God, like this is crazy. So yeah, I reintroduced animal foods. There was different ways I did that, including like incorporating broths into things and other things to kind of like prep my microbiome to be more receptive to eating animal products. So I actually didn't have any transition issues. And then during this time, I was kind of learning about the pro-metabolic diet, which if you don't know is a style of eating that's influenced by Ray Peat. Ray Peat has a PhD in biology from the University of Oregon. He talks extensively about human biology, physiology, and a lot about women's hormones, estrogen, cancer, and things like that. Some of his information is disputed, but we won't get into that. Anyway, the pro-metabolic diet is based on his research, but I will put a little caveat here to say that there is no such thing as a pro-metabolic diet. It really is just people trying to encourage you to eat in a way that supports your metabolism. But in our world of diet culture, we tend to take this into extremes or into food rules where it's like, this is permitted and this is not permitted and you have to do this, and if you don't do this and you're not doing it right. That's not what pro-metabolic is. Pro-metabolic literally is just eating in a way that supports your metabolism. But again, when I first was introduced to it, I didn't know that. And I really wanted to heal my body because, like I said, I had all these issues. I was over exercising. I was so burnt out. My hormones were going crazy. Like I had terrible PMS and all of this, like everything was bad. And I was coming out of a vegan vegetarian diet that was really, really strict. So when I was kind of introduced to these concepts of like, you can heal your hormones and your burnout and you just need to eat food and like sugar's not bad and stop having all these food rules and, you know, it's okay to have a treat and whatever. It's okay to have these treats once in a while. I went crazy. I don't know if you've ever come out of a restrictive diet, but usually what happens is you become very permissive. Once you give yourself permission to eat foods you were not allowed to eat previously, you will find often that you give yourself permission all the time. You're like, a brownie every day with lunch? Great idea. You know, like chicken Caesar wrap every single day? Awesome. You know, and you start just eating things in excess because you're now allowed to. What we want to do is find a nice middle ground, but for me at the time, I went full permissive. So I started gaining weight again. And like I said, this was during the pandemic, so gyms were actually closed where I lived. And I was still kind of healing from my burnout, right? So I was also exposed to these ideas that like over exercising is going to like mess up your cortisol, and that's not going to help me recover from burnout. In truth, there's a lot of context to that, but I just wanted to believe it. I was like, yes, I need to like rest. I just need to rest and I need to eat food, which to some extent was true, but not the way I did it. So I went from like a power lifter, long distance cycler to somebody who just walked around my neighborhood and was eating the same amount of food that I ate when I was powerlifting and long distance cycling. So yeah, I gained weight. Then I kind of entered into the low carb carnivore sphere of things, learning about how that might help me lose some of this weight. And so I tried that on for a little while, and it did help ultimately lose about 20 pounds, I think, around that. But it didn't actually make me better, and I think it made me worse. My blood sugar got more dysregulated, and my weight loss stalled out, and my available energy in my body wasn't really available anymore. Like things like walking up a big steep hill was just winding me. But more than winding me, it was like my muscles were exhausted. My legs felt so heavy. And ultimately, like, my body just was not doing well on a low carb diet. And some people's bodies don't, especially if you are somebody who thinks you have like low thyroid function. Low carb diets are not good for low thyroid. They might be good if you have high thyroid or autoimmune thyroid, but not if you're hypothyroid. And these are the kind of things with context that aren't provided. And, you know, when you're like in a desperate place and you just want an answer and you just want to feel better, it can be really easy to just be like, I'm going to do this. This makes sense. Like, they say it's good, right? Like, I'm just going to do it. Like, that makes sense. And again, like, if you're coming from a place of restrictive eating patterns, like vegetarian, vegan, like you're used to eliminating entire food groups, it can be really difficult to believe that a diet that does not eliminate food groups is actually the best. And it's not very glamorous, right? Like, we want to be like, oh, like this special elite diet, but it's like, no, like literally just a whole foods diet that allows you to eat whatever is actually the best. But there is context to that as well. Like, you need to have boundaries for yourself because, like I said, we don't want to be in a fully permissive state where we give ourselves permission to eat whatever, even if it's not in our best interest. But that's another episode. So I realized that the low carb diet wasn't really working for me, and I had become a lot more active in my life, consulting people, working in a vitamin store, going back to school, and then eventually working as a restaurant manager in a local casual fine dining place that specializes in farm to table food. So I ended up going back to that industry, but I realized like this low carb isn't really working. I'm going to try and introduce carbs back in more abundance. And slowly I managed to do that. And now I would say I eat an omnivorous, seasonal, sustainable diet. I allow myself to eat treats when I want to, and it hasn't really made any big issue. I've actually been steadily losing weight with very little effort on my part, which is cool. And that is having the most unrestricted diet that I've ever had. And I have basically no gut issues, no PMS, except very occasionally, and I can usually trace that back to like specific deficiencies that I've had, and I'm like, oh yeah, like, yeah, that makes sense why now I have PMS this month because I didn't do this, this, and this like a couple months ago or whatever. The autoimmune symptoms that I was describing of the mast cell activation syndrome, generally speaking, I don't have any of those syndromes. I still have a little bit of low blood pressure, but it's way better than it used to be, and same with I have a low pulse. But I used to be able to take my pulse while sitting on the couch and I'd have about 35 beats per minute. I'm not even kidding you. Now I have like 60 beats per minute, which is, you know, a lot better. So slowly through diet and experience and lifestyle and all of these things, I've managed to get rid of all of the symptoms that I was previously experiencing. And when I do experience a symptom, when I do have a little flare up, I usually, without fail, can pinpoint exactly why it's happening. Like, I'm like, oh, I didn't have enough minerals, or like, oh, I ate like this for like 2 weeks, or whatever. Like, oh, I've been having more wine lately than I usually do. And I think personally there's a place for alcohol in the diet, but you know, again, we need to have boundaries with all of these things. So I hope that gave you a little insight into some of my story. And if you're interested in learning more, please shoot me a message. Let me know what you'd like to hear on a podcast. I would love to record for you. And if you are looking to start your journey with holistic health and restoring your gut function, I would love to help you. I have a free resource available for you. It's called Rewild Your Gut in 7 days. And that is available on my website, vitaessentia.com. If you look at the resources tab and go to free guides, you'll find all the free guides that I have available there. Just pop in your email and then you can check your email inbox for a download. And the link for that is also in the show notes if you want to check it out. If you enjoyed this podcast, I would love it if you left a little review, gave me a couple stars, or shared it with a friend so I can get the word out there. Well, that's all I have for you today, and I really hope that this episode has been relatable. I hope that you can see a little bit about the journey I've been through. And if you're ready to get started, I would love to hear your story. I'd love to support you, and I'd love to prevent you from going through this crazy journey the way I did. Let's save you some time and some heartache and just get straight to what actually works. If you want to book a complimentary 25-minute consultation with me, just go to my website, vitaessentia.com/book-your-free-call. That will also be in the show notes. Thanks so much for listening, and talk soon.